fun, wasn't it? A lot of hands-on things and very useful, right? The activated charcoal is powerful stuff and very inexpensive, and it works. So that was a neat seminar. And then most notably, Barbara O'Neill, when we had to overflow to downstairs. So that was a fun seminar too. How many of you were here for Barbara O'Neill? All right, so that gives you a little idea. Now a little birdie told me that Lee knows Barbara. Yeah, so maybe he'll mention that about something about her, we'll see. So last week on Monday, we were supposed to have the intro to the Depression Recovery Seminar. Some of you may have seen that advertised. And the weather postponed it until this Monday. And then what happened? The weather postponed it again. So I did look on the weather forecast for this coming Monday, the 20th. It's supposed to be cold, I will not lie, but there's no precipitation. So I think third time it's going to work. So the Nedley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program is known internationally as the most effective for recovery from depression and anxiety. And so we feel privileged to be able to bring it here to our community. So you may not struggle with depression or anxiety, but you might know someone that does, that you would like to have come to the seminar. If they won't even come with you, but you want to know more so that you could tell them more about it, go ahead and come Monday night. Or bring them with you, whatever, tell people about it. It's a free night, and it gives you an intro as to what the seminar will be. And then it will be every Monday night through March 31. So that's something you could put on your calendar if it interests you. There's no cost for the program except that there are materials that you need to make the program effective for you, and those materials do have a cost. And all that will be covered in the intro meeting, okay? So we have a little team that leads out with that, and it's an enjoyable program, and it's a blessing. So if that's something that interests you, come Monday night. It will be downstairs here at this location in our seminar room. And if you were here for Barbara O'Neill, you've already seen the seminar room, so you know where it is. Otherwise, it's just downstairs. Now, a few housekeeping things. The bathrooms are out the back doors here. Go to the left, like you're going to go out the front door. Just before you get to the front door, there's a hallway to the right, and that's where the bathrooms are. Also, there is water there and cups, a water dispenser and cups. So if you need water, please help yourself. All right? Now, it's dark outside, and I did notice there was a little water down at the bottom there where I parked, and so it's getting colder, and that might be slippery, so please be careful. Also, we have all our parking guys. They're outfitted with flashlights, and at the close of the meeting, they'll be more than happy to help you get to your car, okay? So don't be bashful. Let them know if you need some light and an arm, they're there for you. We had this upcoming seminars flyer. If you didn't get one, you might want to pick one up as you leave. They're on the table right there by the front door. So we have several seminars coming up. After this one, we have a seminar on Saturday with 3 different classes. Joy Lessons, the Art and Science of Faith-Based Mental Health. This is by Jennifer Jill Swerzer. She's fun. I love listening to her talk, and she's not just fun, she's informative. So you would really enjoy that if this subject interests you. Then we have the Unlocking Revelation by Dr. Eric Frecking, and he does a beautiful job. It's very interesting and a lot of information. So if you want a lot of information on the book of Revelation, this is for you. And then we have Marsha McGrath coming to do cooking, a cooking class. And she does a fun cooking class. I haven't got to go to one. My husband went to it. He said it was amazing. So you'll enjoy that too. And it's all plant-based recipes. How are we doing?
Well, we have a screen on these screens.
Uh-huh.
We don't have it on the
Okay, so you're working on that?
I'm working on it, but we can go ahead and get started
Okay, and the computer?
The computer is on the screen
Okay,
right now.
great.
And you can see it on the back here.
All right. Now, tonight, afterward, the books and candles and tinctures that you saw will be for sale. They'll also be for sale on Sunday, before the meeting, and before and after the meeting. They will not be for sale tomorrow or Saturday. So if you're interested, it's tonight after the meeting or Sunday before or after the seminar, okay? Now, some people ask us, how do you do, these seminars for free? Well, we believe that a healthy community is a happy one, right? So we like to invest in offering these seminars that help our community's health, okay? But some people say, well, we'd like to help. So there is a box out in the back. If you want to help, you're welcome to do it, but there's absolutely no obligation because it is a free seminar, okay? Now, tomorrow's seminar is about combating cancer with herbal remedies and lifestyle. So that'll be a really interesting moment. Cancer is just, it's a robber, And I want to know all I can about how to prevent it and get rid of it if I get it, don't you? All right. So let's open with a word of prayer. And then we will welcome Dr. Wellard to speak with us tonight. And you'll also notice in the back with the books and the tinctures are his wife and children. So we're glad they're here too.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. And I'm thankful that Dr. Lee Wellard is with us. He is going to be speaking at Johns Hopkins University in the month of March. So it's a privilege to have you here. And we had him here once before in the community, and he did a marvelous job. I know you're going to learn a lot of amazing things, but let's just bow our heads for a word of prayer. Father in heaven, again, we want to thank you that you care about the whole individual, not only our spiritual well-being, but our physical well-being, and we know that they go together. So as we contemplate, as we listen, as we wrestle through the information that will be shared with us, we ask that you would send your Holy Spirit to illuminate our minds, and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome, Dr. Wellard.
Well, good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? This one? Okay. Oh, that's better. All right. Thank you. All right. It's great to be here and brave the cold together. We live in Kentucky, but as you can tell, my accent is not from Kentucky. I'm from down south. And when I mean down south, I mean real down south. Australia? Okay. But I was born in England. I grew up in Australia. I live in America. So I speak 3 different languages. Sometimes they get all mixed up. So hope you can follow me with my lingo this evening. But great to be here. And I'm excited for you to join us. We've got a few days together, and I'm excited about what we're going to be learning. Tonight we have a topic on diabetes, and then also we're going to be looking at hormones, how to balance ladies' hormones. So all the men need to be taking notes tonight. All right. So, but anyway, I know we're running a little behind time, so I'll just try to dive into it, and hopefully we can get through this succinctly, and I'm hoping we can have some time for questions as well. So I'm guessing these screens follow me here, so let's start with this explosion. I like to start with explosions. This was an atomic bomb that went off in the Marshall Islands, well, in the Pacific Ocean, and this was over 50 years ago, and it caused quite havoc in the community, and the Marshall Islanders actually sued the U.S. government and won. And they ended up with millions of dollars coming into their island. And what do you think they did with all this money? They brought in a lot of the Western diet, right? Who would have thought? McDonald's came in and all these fast food restaurants. Did you know there were 0 cases of diabetes beforehand? But when they started adopting the Western lifestyle, then all these diseases that we have transmitted to the Marshall Islands. And it was interesting, if you look at their diet before, their traditional diet is mainly comprised of tropical fruits and vegetables and a little bit of fish. But now it's a different story. And so we see there was a dramatic escalation in diabetes that came after that. You know, a lot of people just think it's genetic, right? You know, my father had it and his father had it, and so I'm destined to have it. Well, genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle is what pulls the trigger. So, you know, yes, we may have tendencies that transmit from generation to generation, but we don't have to play the same music that our parents played, so to speak, from a physiological perspective. So diabetes is definitely on the increase. In fact, there is close to, this is all the stats here, but right now we're close to about 38 million diabetics in North America. And if you include people that are pre-diabetic, it would be actually over 100 million citizens in the United States. So this is one of the fastest growing conditions in our nation today. And of course, we have a lot of complications that come from diabetes. The biggest one is heart disease, right? And diabetes is very, very similar to heart disease in the sense that it's dealing with the vascular system. Now, the heart disease is more the what we call the macrovascular system, whereas the diabetes is dealing with the microvascular. It's dealing with the capillary networks and these little tributaries that get stuck with high sugar in the blood. So it's no surprise that if we start to get diabetes and that affects the microcirculation, that in turn it would actually affect the larger blood vessels that are going to end up causing things like hypertension and stroke to occur. So 73% of diabetics have a high blood pressure, and most diabetics actually will die from heart disease. We also have blindness. There's actually close to about 30,000 in, this was old statistics here, but the reason for that is because there's no way to regulate blood sugar in the eyes, and that's why the eyes and the kidneys, because there's no way to regulate blood sugar in the kidneys either. So those are the two organs that tend to suffer the most with diabetes. And then we have peripheral neuropathy as well that often occurs, and 30 to 50% of diabetics end up getting nerve damage. And of course, there's pain and numbness in the hands and feet, and sometimes people aren't even aware that they have taken the skin off their feet, and ulcers can occur and so forth. And then carpal tunnel syndrome as well is on the increase, and digestion is slowed down with these effects of diabetes on the nervous system. And then, of course, amputations are also a major outcome for long-term diabetics. And then the effects on the brain, okay, mood and memory changes. This is very, very significant. And anytime you affect the sugar, you're going to affect the brain. You can affect the way you think, right? You're going to end up oftentimes draining the nervous system, or in some cases you over-exacerbate the body with too much sugar. And there's a diabetes was found quite a few years ago called type 3. Anyone heard of type 3 diabetes? Where it's very similar. It affects what we call the insulin growth factor, which regulates blood sugar in the brain. And they found that a lot of people that they diagnosed as Alzheimer's patients were actually type 3 diabetics. They have a hard time regulating the blood sugar in the brain. And there's 10 to 34% more likely risk to become depressed. Okay, so depression often occurs as one of the symptoms. And not only that, you affect the blood flow through the brain. Now, I learned this through one of the top pathologists in the country, and it was a profound statement he made, and it stuck with me, and I want to share it with you tonight. He said the best way to bring healing to any part of the body was to increase blood flow. All right? And this goes for any condition. It's amazing. If you just accelerate blood flow. For example, with depression, they found in severe cases of depression, you have up to 60% reduction in blood flow to the prefrontal lobe, prefrontal cortex. And so this affects your mood. It can lead to depression. And so getting out and exercising, right, is a key thing. I remember many times Jesus said, get up and walk, you know. That's one of the cures for depression, right? Increase that blood flow. And there's other things that can help with blood flow. We'll get to some botanicals towards the end I want to share with you that can be really helpful for diabetics. Infections occur more frequently, and more people are likely to die with pneumonia or influenza, and the expected lifespan of diabetics is reduced for about 12 to 14 years. And this is significant because people can end up in their middle age, ended up in a nursing home. And we just went to one recently, and they're not all old people that are in nursing homes. In fact, this year I can qualify to be in a nursing home, I found out. So, all right, giving away my age. So what is diabetes? Diabetes is too much sugar, all right, in the blood and urine. And you know, it wasn't that long ago where doctors would actually diagnose you with diabetes by putting their finger in the urine and tasting it, seeing if it was sweet. I'm so glad that practice has been discarded. Yes, it was also known as sugar. Okay, you've got sugar. So one of the ways that we can help with diabetes is increasing nuts. Now, I'm not talking about eating a whole bag of peanuts, but things like, walnuts and pecans, pistachios and Brazil nuts and cashews, these great nuts can really help lower diabetes risk. How are we going to tell the people that we found the weapons of mass destruction? Okay. All right, so if you're living under the golden arches every day, you may want to change that habit because fast foods, you know why they call them fast foods, is because they're a faster trip to the cemetery, right? In fact, some people eat out so frequently, there's certain parts of the country that are building houses with no kitchens in them. Because they're appealing to a certain type of mindset of people that just eat out on a regular basis. And so, be careful about fast foods. Processed foods. Just go through Walmart. I'm sure a lot of people here, or maybe almost all of you here, are more health conscious, and when you go to the supermarket, you try to make the right choices. But if you're looking at the people in front of you in their shopping trolleys, what do you see? It's largely processed food. I'd say 90 to 95% of it is processed food. And processed food is basically devitalized, right? It's gone through a process where the nutritional elements are taken out. And a lot of the nutrition that we used to get in our food is so lacking today. In fact, I have a device that can test the nutritional concentration of foods. It can test the nutrient density in pretty much any food. And in many cases, it's about 10% or less of what we should be getting from our groceries is actually in the food. All right, because when they take the produce out of the plant, they take it out of the soil. Many times they don't put those micronutrients back in the soil, and so you get high amounts of phosphorus, high amounts of potassium, you get nitrogen, but you don't get those micronutrients that are so important for the body. Let's look at soda. One sugar-sweetened soft drink per day can increase your risk of diabetes by 83%. Isn't that amazing? And one of the ways it does that is basically it's putting on weight. Okay, so if you want to, the fastest way to offset diabetes is weight reduction. Every pound you lose in fat, you decrease your risk of diabetes 2%. For every pound. You know, they're making coffins now that are so big, they're twice the size of a standard coffin. Some people have morbid obesity, and I've worked with some of these people. I've seen 10-year-olds up to 300 pounds. They have coffins that are twice as wide to fit 600, 700, 800-pound individuals into that coffin. It's incredible. And there was a lady actually in the Guinness Book of Records. She weighed 1,200 pounds. You can read about it. She ate 1 meal a day. It was all day she would eat. And one day, someone encouraged her to lose weight. Can you believe that? Someone encouraged her to lose weight. And she decided she couldn't do any exercise other than just move her arms like this. That's all she could do. Very, very small movements. But did you know there's a term called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis? It means that you can lose weight even with micro movements. Your body can still burn off energy. It can still increase mitochondria. And that's why people that are couch potatoes have a harder time losing weight, because they just sit there. They don't even move their feet or their arms or anything. And so these little micro movements can add up to burning calories. Would you believe she lost 1,000 pounds of weight? Over many years. Okay? Didn't just happen in 1 month. It happened over, actually, I think it was several years. She was down to 200 pounds. Being 1,200 pounds down to 200 pounds. Isn't that amazing? I think she should have got a medal for that. And so it can, I mean, if someone's 1,200 pounds, I mean, that's saying something. If they can lose weight, then what excuse do we have, right? But that just shows you. And she lived to about 65 years of age, so she lived a fairly long life considering what she went through. And so this gets back to this weight situation, because every extra pound, you're gaining 2% more risk, okay? So diabetics are very, very prone to have what we call fatty liver, okay? 85% of people with diabetes type 2 have fatty liver. And so this occurs because of excessive amounts of eating refined carbohydrates. And it ends up going to the liver. The liver can't metabolize so much of this, and it ends up actually, first of all, it starts with getting some inflammation, okay? And then it ultimately ends in cirrhosis of the liver. You can have what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver syndrome, okay? There was a gentleman that didn't have alcohol, but he had ice cream every night, and he ended up with non-alcoholic fatty liver syndrome. And did you know how many people have fatty liver in the United States? This will come as a shock. It's actually over 100 million. Yes, 100 million. It's around 1 in 3 adults. Even kids are getting fatty liver. Some kids are actually having liver transplants. Yes, very young age. So this is getting way out of control. And America is not, as you probably notice, it's not on the top of the list as far as health goes, is it? No. And yet we are the number one in spending on medicine, in spending on medical intervention. All right, what we need is education, right? If you can swallow some education, you can avoid swallowing a lot of medication. So we pay for our health either by getting medicated or by getting educated. And I think there's a scripture that says, my people perish from lack of knowledge, right? Not medication, right? Knowledge. All right, so it's the knowledge also of our health that we need to protect us. Psychosocial stress unbalances the body's hormones, and this promotes central obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And, you know, we are seeing a dramatic increase in stress, aren't we? And stress usually drives people to raid the fridge. It drives them to eat junk food. It drives them to get into addictive lifestyle habits. Do you know sleeping 6 hours or less per night doubles the risk of diabetes? Now, what do you think 9 hours or more will do for diabetes? It actually tripled the risk. Okay, so it's interesting. 95% of people need 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. There are 5% of people that can thrive, and some survive, but thrive off of 6 hours or less of sleep. I'm not one of those people, but I like 7 hours. But the longevity study shows 7 hours is optimum, right? Now, as I said before, this isn't for everyone, but for most of us, this will be the best plan forward. And also, the later you go to bed, the more stress you have, and the higher the risk of diabetes. Do you know that 20% of diabetics are slim like me? Why do you think that is? Stress. Stress drives the sympathetic nervous system to keep pumping sugar into the body because we have what's called a flight or fight response, right? So, you know, I used to live in Australia, and where I used to live, there was 2,000 snakes per acre of land. So I've seen a lot of snakes. They just pop out the hole. I was playing golf one day, one popped out between my legs, out this hole. Just scared the life out of me. One time I was in my bedroom, and it was this fat snake. It was this fat. I'm not exaggerating. And it just came in right in my bedroom. I had one fell off my kitchen's roof one time. It just fell into the kitchen, and I grabbed it by the tail, and it wrapped around my arm, and his head was coming towards me. I decided to put it in the oven. I wasn't going to eat it, don't worry. I was just going to keep it there because I thought it would be a good pet to keep all the other snakes away because it was a carpet snake. And carpet snakes actually keep the other snakes at bay. But it escaped out of this little pilot hole in the back of the oven. And I don't know where it ended up. But if you saw a snake, chances are you'd have a fight or flight response, right? Right, so let's imagine you're just walking through the woods in Australia and you see this black slippery thing on the side, peripheral vision. What's going to happen? Your heart rate, your lungs, your pupils dilate, everything's getting ready to run away. And then you take another look and you see it's a garden hose. And then everything just comes down, right? Okay. Now, some people think snakes are cute. I'm not one of those people. I just like to kill them. But for some people, they think they're nice and they keep them as pets. Now, isn't that odd that just some people look at a snake and they can have a heart attack, and another person, they think it's cute? Doesn't that seem to be odd? I met a lady in Japan. She was paralyzed from looking at a centipede. I kid you not. She was paralyzed from looking at a centipede. She was so stressed. By the way, centipedes can give you quite a toxic reaction. In fact, I used to live in the Philippines, and you'd have to shake your trousers out because you get these centipedes. They go up there, and sometimes scorpions. They like to go in your pants, you know, and it's not a nice feeling. It's stung by this. But the point I'm trying to make is that stress really is determined by your perception of the stressor. So whatever threatens you the most causes you the most stress. For some people, it's who they're living with. Okay? For some other people, it's the pile of bills. For other people, it's maybe, I don't know, their pets. So we all have these stressors, right? But the way we look at them determines how much they impact us physiologically. And so stress is often the driving force behind a lot of these conditions. In fact, I've consulted with thousands of people over the years, and I would say, from my experience, 90% of people end up on poor lifestyle habits because it's been driven by stress. All right, and it's important to identify that because, unless we get to the cause of it, all these other symptoms just keep occurring, right? You just go from one symptom to another. And so, you've got to first identify the stressor, and then you need to work on, this is where the Lord comes in, changes our perception of that stressor so that we can function without that fear and that anxiety. And so when fat cells are too full, they lose their ability to respond to insulin. The fatigued pancreas eventually loses its capacity to produce insulin, and blood sugars soar even higher. All right, so it takes quite a few years to get to a diabetic state. In fact, by the time you're even diagnosed as a diabetic, how much of your pancreas has been destroyed? You want to guess? It's about 80%. It's about 80% of your pancreas is already gone. The beta cells are destroyed. All right, and one of the things that can impact this greatly is sugar, refined sugars. Okay? Refined sugars. Having a can of soft, 12 teaspoons of sugar, a sundae, ice cream sundae, 24 teaspoons of sugar. You know how the average person in the United States eats 3 pounds of sugar a week. 3 pounds of sugar a week. That's 150 pounds. So the average man, about 150 pounds, he eats his own weight in sugar every year. All right, and that has tremendous impact upon the immune system as well. In fact, when do we see doctor's visits the highest? Thanksgiving, all right? It's around Christmas, it's around Halloween, it's around, Valentine's Day, Easter, all these events, right, that are connected with indulgence of sugar. And children actually suffer most because if they eat an adult portion of sugar, they'll end up much higher risk in the hospital. So sugar's a big one. I'm not saying you can never eat sugar, but I would definitely recommend you get sugar from good fruit sources, all right? And by the way, diabetics shouldn't be juicing. Why is that? Because your blood sugar goes spike. Because there's no fiber to time release the sugar into the body. So if you take the whole fruit, and by the way, diabetics can eat fruit. Isn't that good news? Okay. Yeah, just don't eat large amounts of dried fruit and also fruit juice. That can be problematic. Here's another thing that a lot of people do with blood sugar. They eat a refined cereal breakfast, and then they eat a mid-morning snack. They eat a protein-rich lunch, and then they have an afternoon coffee break, and then they have a big meal at night. One of the things you want to avoid is eating a big meal at night. Okay? Why is that? Because your stomach, it needs some rest. And at night, it wants to be rest-free. It doesn't want to be churning food at night. Okay? When your stomach churns, you turn in bed. Did you know that? Yes, your sleep will be disturbed when you have too much food in the stomach. And this pattern sets you up for continually chasing your blood sugar to get to normal. You're going to be playing catch-up the rest of your life, especially eating snacks. Eat a good breakfast, and then just drink water in between meals, all right? and then have a good lunch. There's a saying says, eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, supper like a pauper. All right. Now, when I used to work in Georgia at a lifestyle center and hospital down there, they would put their patients on a 2-meal-a-day program. This was diabetics. And they had the option of having a third meal, which was lemon water at night. If they really persisted and insisted, they would give them some fruit or something light. But guess what happened to their sugar levels? It went down. And most of those people, in less than 2 weeks, were off all their diabetic medications. Yeah. It was amazing. I've seen people, I remember a lady, she came to a lifestyle center, and she could hardly step up into the lifestyle center. She was 350 pounds. She was taking 300 units of insulin a day. Can you imagine? 300 units of insulin a day. Anyway, changed her lifestyle. She went on a plant-based diet, got her exercising. Walking is key with diabetics. Because when you walk, you burn off 50% fat, 50% sugar. It's the best form of exercise for diabetics. After 3 weeks, she was off all her insulin. And she lost 20 pounds, and she was able to walk a mile. Whereas before, she was hardly able to get a foot into the lifestyle center. So this is key. Not snacking, but you have to follow this advice if you're going to do this. You can't do processed food. And you have to get sufficient amounts of protein and sufficient amounts of wholesome fats. Otherwise, you will not be able to last the distance. All right. And also, I'm just sharing this with you. You don't want to do this on your own. You want to make sure that someone you're working with knows what they're doing. And there are times you want to eat 3 meals a day, especially if you are doing a lot of physical activity. So glucose is the preferred fuel of the cell. Too much glucose clogs the blood vessels, coats the blood cells. We call this glycation, okay? And this is what makes the cells sticky. And then you have what's called the Rayleigh effect, where the cells start to stick to each other. And so there was one study this was an amazing study, by the way, that showed how you could quickly reduce diabetes through lifestyle intervention. And the goal was to have a weight loss target of 7%, which is fairly easy to do. Exercise daily, it was 150 minutes a week. So that's not a super amount of exercise. By the way, if you want to get the best results, okay, do an hour to an hour and a half walking a day. Not all at once, just intermittently throughout the day. And if you do walking more in the morning, you will actually increase your thyroid activity to actually be at a higher rate of metabolism, so you burn off more calories during the rest of the day. So don't exercise all at once at night. Do it in the morning. Not saying you can't do it in any other time, but when you exercise, to get maximum benefits, you want to do most of it in the morning. That's the best time to do it. And improved eating as well, by the way. High fiber intake, low saturated fat, and low glycemic load. And there was a 58% reduction of diabetes at the end of this trial, which is amazing, really. So let me I'm going to have to go a little faster here. I'm just looking at the time. So eat more fiber-rich foods. The average American only gets about 10% of his dietary fiber per day. And this is one of the reasons why we see so slow bowel movements. It's amazing to me when people tell me I don't have a bowel movement, once every 3 days. Some people once a week. I mean, that's crazy. You should be having, if you have 3 meals a day, you should be going about 3 times, at least twice. You want to at least be going twice a day. And so if we lack the fiber, then that's going to be hard on the body to have that happen. So fiber protects against constipation, high cholesterol, heart disease, high blood sugar, diabetes, certain cancers, and obesity. It's not just a broom, by the way. Fiber helps actually to take toxins out of the system. It helps with the microflora in the intestinal tract. It also helps with absorption. It helps slow the transit time of sugar. It helps bulk the stool. It helps with peristalsis action. It's an amazing process. So, yes, so make sure that you get enough whole grains, whole foods for whole people, right? So eat. Oh, here's another thing that you really need to do. Eat regularly. Eat on time. So if your schedule of eating is dictated by your work, then you're going to have trouble. I think I've consulted with probably a couple of hundred nurses in my time. And I tell people, you tell me how long you've been a nurse, I'll tell you what conditions you have. Because they're repeating. They hardly have time to even drink as a nurse. Sometimes the particular stations they have, they're forced not to drink. They have to look at a monitor all the time. And they're on these concrete floors. And they have to, eat in like 5-10 minutes, and they don't have much exercise. And, a lot of their work is paperwork and drugs, and, it's very hard on their body, and especially if you're a night nurse. So exercise is key to help with this process of balancing sugar. And if you can't find time to exercise, you'll have to find time to be sick, unfortunately. All right, so weight loss is very, very important. Sorry, I'm running through these because of time. Vitamin D, sunshine, very, very important. If you're low in vitamin D, it will increase your risk of diabetes. If you can't get outdoors for whatever reason, make sure you take a supplement. It's important that they've lowered the vitamin D levels in the United States, what is considered acceptable. It used to be the doctors worry if you're like in the 30s. Now they don't get worried if you're in the 20s. If you're down to 20, sometimes they don't even talk about it to you. But ideally, you want to be above 50. Okay, if you're down to 45 or less, your parathyroid glands can suffer, your calcium uptake can suffer, your kidneys end up sucking up a lot of your vitamin D, and it doesn't provide the fat-soluble vitamin to other places of the body that it needs to combat infections and help the immune system. Water is very important also for diabetes, drinking enough pure water. And unfortunately, a lot of our water is not the best type of water. And make sure you get some water filter. We use a gravity-fed Berkey filter. It works really well. Anyone heard of cedar berries? All right, well, let me give you another name you've probably heard of. Juniperus monosperma. Have you heard that one? All right. Okay, this is what we're talking about. Okay, in fact, I have some in my pocket here. All right. All right, that's them there. So they're very small, and they're very hard, okay? And one day I was over in Indiana. I had this nurse practitioner come in to see me, and she had a 9-year-old daughter who was a type 1 diabetic. And I was really surprised that she hadn't put her on insulin. She had been a diabetic for 3 years. Her blood sugar levels were around 300 on average. And I said to her, maybe you should think about, having insulin for your daughter. And then she started tearing up on me, and I thought, oh, I hit a delicate nerve there. And so I said to her, look, I don't know, I've heard this from another herbalist, I've never tried this, but would you be interested in getting her on some cedar berries? Now, this is a particular variety. This is a Juniperus monosperma variety, so don't go out there harvesting all these cedar berries off the tree and expect the same results. And so she said, look, I'm willing to give it a try. So, I gave her some berries, and she would suck them just in the back of her mouth and just let the juice, and there's a seed in the middle there. And not very pleasant to taste, but it's better than wormwood. Okay, so she did this, and we worked out how many she was to take. And because she was a third of the dose based on her weight. And so she came back to see me. It was actually 2 weeks later, and she had written down, actually it was 1 week later, she wrote down 3 times a day all her numbers of her blood sugar, being a nurse practitioner. And she had a big smile on her face, and she said, check this out. So she showed me the paper, and the blood sugar on average was around 140. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And she said, yeah, the 2 numbers here, these high numbers, she said she cheated. She didn't take them. And so I said, well, keep doing what you're doing. So she went back and she kept with the program. And then she came back 2 weeks after that, and she had another chart, and it was down to 110. And then she came back a 3rd time, and it got as low as 80. Yeah. And she was so happy. She sent all her workers from hospital. Her parents came up to see me from Florida. She told all her hospital workers. She just bought everyone she could. And I'm not saying if you on insulin, you type 1, just drop everything and take this, okay? All I'm saying that there are things that you may want to try in conjunction with certain things that, with someone that knows what they're doing, that may be a help in situations like that. And we've used this for type 2 diabetes as well, and it's worked very well for type 2 diabetes. And there are some other ones I want to share with you tonight. This one is called Gymnema. Anyone heard of Gymnema? Okay, Gymnema sylvestri. That's its botanical name. And it's very good for insulin resistance. And I found out also, just accidentally, that it is very good for persistent coughs. I had a gentleman come in, he was getting this for his wife. She had diabetes, but he didn't tell me she was coughing every day, every night. He couldn't even sleep in the same bedroom with her because of her coughs. And so he said, after she started taking this, her coughs disappeared. And so, well, praise the Lord. That's good. I want to remember that for future. I actually had a lady who'd been coughing 20 years later, like a year, 2 years after that happened. And she was coughing so bad, she said she couldn't go anywhere. If she was sitting at church, people think she had COVID because she was coughing. And I've never heard a woman so happy as this woman because her coughing disappeared. And it was just a couple of simple herbs that helped her. Fenugreek seed is another one. Now, fenugreek seed is mucilaginous, and it slows the transit time of sugar into the body. And so it's very effective in slowing down sugar being released into the bloodstream. It also has a chemical called 4-hydroxyisoleucine that stimulates the pancreas to produce more beta cells. So believe it or not, the beta cells can actually be replaced. All right, they can't. I didn't think this was possible, but we used to think the brain cells couldn't replace, and we found out, well, they can by stem cells. So it's the same with the pancreas. So fenugreek seeds are an excellent one to do that. Turmeric root is another excellent one, and the reason for that is because turmeric root is such a powerful anti-inflammatory. And all diabetics are filled with inflammation. All right, and also it thins the blood, and so this prevents poor circulation from taking place. It also protects against free radical damage, and it's very, very effective in the immune response, and also it's regenerative for the pancreas as well. And just recently, I had a nurse call me from down in Georgia, and her husband had pancreatic cancer. And he was in a lot of pain because when you have pancreatic cancer, it's very, very debilitating pain-wise because you have all these release of enzymes, right, that start to basically dissolve tissue, and it's very, very painful. And so I put him on turmeric root, but I also put him on some bitter herbs. Now, the reason I put him on bitter herbs is because bitter herbs, they stimulate the bitter receptors in the back of the tongue, and these receptors are connected to the vagus nerve, which goes to the stomach. And then what they do is they increase the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And when you elevate hydrochloric acid, you also increase bile flow. And as a result of these mechanisms taking place, you end up with more enzymatic release from the pancreas. And you can actually offset a lot of the damage and reduce the pain through increasing hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So, so his wife told me it was a new lease on life, just like after one day of taking bitter herbs. He was pain-free, and it was just amazing. So I was thinking, in the back of my head when these things happen, I think, well, maybe someone else could benefit from this in the future, you know. But there's always different causes for the same condition, right? So we've got to keep that in mind when we're dealing. It's not a cookie-cutter thing, right? It's not one size fits all. We're not at the tree of life yet. There's not one herb that works for everyone, for every situation 100% of the time. But the more you understand physiology and how the body works and the cause of those conditions, the more adept you can get at specifying what specific remedies that could be the most effective for that condition. So anyway, I'm going to, we're going to have a short break, if that's okay. Running a little behind time here. So if we could have a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to talk about hormones and do the impossible of trying to cover women's hormones in 25 minutes. So if that's okay, and then whoever's left, we'll have some Q&A time. Is that all right? So just take a 5-minute break, and I'll just gear this up for the next slideshow. Thank you. Did you figure that out? No? Okay. All right, if you'd like to take a seat, we will start round 2. Anyone interested in hormones? How to help hormones? Okay, we got some good company here. Okay, excellent. So I can't possibly surround this, but I will do my best. We've only got about 30 minutes or so. I'll make sure we have some time for questions. So I won't be able to cover everything, but we'll try to get as much in as we can. Statistics show that 80% of women suffer from hormonal imbalance. Some women live with these imbalances without even realizing it. In fact, 70% of women are unaware of conditions like PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, that may have manifested due to hormonal irregularities. And there's hardly a lady I see now. In fact, 80% is very, very conservative. I would say over 90% of women I see, even women I talk to that I don't see, but just generally, there's more and more issues with hormones. And actually, this is the number one trending topic on health today, is hormones, women's hormones, and how to help women's hormones. All right, so we have the pituitary gland, which is really regulated by the hypothalamus, which is regulated by the nervous system. And this is a very, very important gland because this communicates to all the other glands of the body. And through a system of biofeedback mechanism, it regulates through the blood, the hormones, to help balance. And so we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is that like fight or flight response when we get stressed. The sympathetic is basically there to give us energy and get things moving. And the parasympathetic nervous system helps to basically bring that back to resting state. And so when you look at hormones, think about it like a symphony, okay? Hormones are to act like a symphony. So it takes more than a good soprano to make a choir, doesn't it? All right? And if you have a conductor but no symphony, you're not going to get any music. You need all the musicians, everyone working in concert. All right? So think about it. When you're looking at hormones, no one hormone is an island to itself. Every hormone in the body impacts every other hormone. And there's over 600 hormones in the body. And so it's more like an interplay of music. All right? And we have ebbs, we have highs, we have lows. Okay, so when we talk about balancing hormones, we're not really talking about putting the hormones into a sort of like a flat level, you know, so they're always constant. No, they just need to be regulated so they're in place. They're secreted at the right time. Now, this is very, very important to understand, and this may come as a bit of a shock to some of you, but I'm going to say it anyway. So whenever you introduce a hormone, now you may want to pay attention to what I'm going to say here. Whenever you introduce a hormone into your body, orally, or inject it, then you basically become the conductor of the symphony. So here's the thing. Anytime you put hormone, even if they're identical to what the body makes, when you put that into the body, it goes in the bloodstream, then what ends up happening is that your body will diminish gradually the amount of hormone to offset that influx of hormone. So over time, it gets less and less. For example, let's say you're having trouble sleeping, so you take melatonin, right? So you go to the store and you can get 3 micrograms, you can get 5 micrograms, you can get 10 micrograms, which is about 100 times what your body makes. And so you start taking one of these tablets, and all this melatonin goes in your bloodstream. And there's a part of the brain and the pituitary gland that doesn't have a blood-brain barrier. It's like a dipstick, and it picks up all the hormones. It knows exactly the level of each hormone. And then it picks up all this melatonin, and then it sends a signal to the pineal gland, which produces the melatonin. It says, stop making it. I want you to stop making it because we have so much abundance here, we don't need any more. And so over time, these signals getting sent to that gland shut down production, shut down production, shut down production. So what's going to happen when you come off melatonin? Your body's going to have a lower amount that's going to kick in, right? And so this goes with estrogen, this goes with progesterone, right? This goes with testosterone. Whatever hormone you put in, because the body will put it in the system in such a way that it's not too abrupt, it's not too aggressive, and it won't leave you at the bottom of a cliff, right? It's just bring it in a wave-like motion, all right? So when you put too much hormones in the body, even if they're exactly the same as what the body makes. And there are times, there are exceptions where we need to do this. For example, I mentioned before about if your body's not making insulin, you still need insulin, right? If your thyroid gland is not making thyroid hormones, you're going to be dependent on an outside source like levothyroxine, right? So there are times where your glands can't produce that. You're going to be dependent on outside sources to supply that need. Okay, but if your body is making those hormones, and then you sabotage that production by basically intaking so much at once, then it's going to send strong signals to the body to lower production. All right. Which means you're going to have more effects when you go on and when you come off, because the body in between is starting to stabilize. Okay, so does that make sense? All right, so now I don't want to get too bogged down in the technical details, but these are hormones that you're probably quite familiar with. We have cortisol, which is that stress hormone. Now, it's not just used for stress, it's actually a glucocorticoid, so it helps regulate blood sugar levels. It's used in the fight or flight response. It also stabilizes the cell membrane. It's very important to the immune system, in fact. If you have too low amounts of cortisol or too high, you're going to have problems with the immune system, okay? So hypo is too low. Hyper is too high, right? So if you have hypocortisol, you're going to have a problem with the immune system. Vice versa, if it's too high, you're going to have more tendency for weight loss, low energy, vitiligo, which is a pigmentation skin condition, increased viral load, you're going to have darkened skin, you're going to have salt cravings. Now, there can be other associated symptoms that go along with this, but those are some of the main ones. Then we have hypercortisol, where you have increased belly fat, you have more allergies are created because of the histamine release. You have diabetes is stimulated. As I mentioned before, 20% of diabetics from the stress response. This is kicked in by the cortisol. And then you have racing mind. Anyone here have racing mind? Can't just shut it off, right? Okay, there's a herb for that, actually. It's called hops. Anyone heard of hops? You know, that's what they make beer out of. They thought that it was the beer that was putting people to sleep. It's actually the hops. So it has a chemical called lupulin. It slows down brainwave activity. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. And then you have did we cover? No, we didn't cover that. Hypertension, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Okay, because the same precursor for stress hormones is the same for. I mean, it's used. It needs cholesterol. It needs cholesterol for stress hormones, same as sex hormones. All right, and this is why stress plays a vital part in hormonal imbalancing. Because the first building block of a stress hormone is the same as the sex hormone. We have cholesterol. Then it goes to pregnenolone, and then after that it diverges. You can either go to cortisol or you can go to progesterone. All right, so if you have more stress, your body's going to make more cortisol than it does progesterone, and then that will affect estrogen, and that will affect testosterone, and there's just a cascading effect. All right, and then low vitamin D levels. We have a condition called Cushing's. We have around face. This is more for serious conditions for high levels of cortisol for a prolonged period of time. Then we have estrogen. If your estrogen's too low, it can lead to depression, dry skin, low libido, hot flashes, poor memory, insomnia, vaginal dryness. But besides that, you're good to go. And then if it's too high, it can be tender breasts, cysts, fluid retention, heavy cycles, cramping, weight gain, and PMS. All right. So estrogen is critical, because if you can see how many things get affected here. I mean, memory, weight gain, right? I mean, this is serious stuff here. And then thyroid. What about the thyroid? This is really important to understand because thyroid is usually a secondary problem. It's not a primary problem. All right, so usually the thyroid goes because of the adrenals. Yes, the adrenals. Now, how does that work? So when your adrenals get basically burned out through high stress levels, the cortisol is so high, basically what happens is that cortisol will interfere with T3 conversion, and it will affect these interleukins, these cell mediators between local tissue and immune system, and you end up with what we call an autoimmune condition. All right, so such as Hashimoto's. Okay, 90% of hypothyroidism is what we call Hashimoto's. It's an autoimmune condition. And so the adrenals go, the thyroid goes, and then the hormones go. And then the weight goes, the sleep goes, hubby goes, everyone goes. Okay, so that's how it happens, all right? And it starts with the adrenals, all right? So the thyroid is a secondary problem. Now, there is another organ that plays a big part in thyroid problems, and that is the liver, because the liver is involved in also T3 conversion, about 60% of it. And so if there's a fatty liver, you know, if there's been a lot of damage to the liver, that can play a part in dysregulation of thyroid. All right, and so if it's low, if you've got low thyroid function, then you have fatigue, depression, dry skin, a loss of eyebrows, brittle hair, hot flashes, night sweats, weight gain. And if it's too high, excess sweat, you have nervousness, hyperactive mind, heart rate increases because metabolism increases, protracted eyes because it's not your eyes get bigger, but the fat deposits in the eyelid actually get burnt up, and it looks like your eyes are popping out. And then insomnia, and then it affects your menstrual cycles, it affects weight loss. And then testosterone, if it's too low, hair loss, low sex drive, depression, fatigue, loss of drive, not just sex drive, but motivation, vaginal dryness, weight gain. And if it's too high, hair loss, acne, deep voice, facial hair, and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. You see at the bottom there, these are some of the major players in causing dysregulation of these hormones. So stress is the biggest one with cortisol. With estrogen, dairy products, and you also have endocrine disruptors, menopause, birth control, HRT, hormone replacement therapy, thyroid, gallbladder, liver, estrogen, autoimmune conditions, and testosterone, insulin, androgens, and adrenals play a big part in affecting testosterone. And so I can't do justice in covering this, but these are just gives you a snapshot of some of the things that can happen when these hormones get affected. All right, so we live in a very plastic world. Would you agree with that? Yes, okay. So you heat this water, but let's say I put this out in the sun, it gets quite hot. These have the plastic in this bottle, it starts to heat up, and it has estrogen mimickers in here. And they can bind to estrogen receptors. And that can disrupt the body's natural ability to actually uptake estrogen in these receptors. And we call these endocrine disruptors. So we have a tremendous amount of problems with hormones due to endocrine disruptors. And it's often because of these chemicals. There's actually been identified 1,000 endocrine disruptors in the United States. And they can be in perfumes, they can be in candles, they can be in beauty care products, they can even be in thermal receipts you get from the store. They can be from plastics and chemicals and paints and all kinds of things that we naturally around us. So we can't escape these things. All we can do is mitigate, minimize the effects. Canned food is another big one, by the way, canned food. So just be aware of this. This has been studied extensively, the effects of endocrine disruptors. Did you know the amount of infertility that is occurring now is so bad that in another generation there wouldn't be another man to procreate because the sperm counts are going down so dramatically and the sperm motility. Let me give you some information to back that up. Okay, so from 1973 to 2018, this was a study done on this. I won't give you all the P ratios and everything, but you can see down the third line from the bottom, basically the total, or TSC's total sperm count, basically reduced at 62.3% in this time period. Okay, 62.3%. That's nearly 2/3 of the sperm count has actually gone down since 1973 to 2018. Let's do the math there. 18 plus 27, 45 years. 45 years, men have lost 2/3 of their sperm count. And this isn't just affecting men, it's affecting even animals. Even seals in Antarctica are being affected. Fish out there, whales, porpoises, dolphins. They are being affected because of all the plastics and all the chemicals that are in the ocean. And these are causing serious effects. So if you want to find out more information, you can go to some of these websites that will give you, you may want to write this down, some of these websites, and you can even get some apps that will tell you whether the food that you're using has high risks of endocrine disruption. Okay, so whenever you go to a doctor to get your hormones looked at, the doctor is just going to focus on that hormone. But there are other things you want to focus on. You don't want to just focus on one hormone. Okay, you want to focus also on what's causing that hormone to be dysregulated. You want to focus on the glandular system that feed that glandular system so that it can produce the hormones it needs, and then reducing the endocrine disruptors so that the hormones your body makes are the ones that are binding to the receptors and having those same effects, those good effects. And then also you want to make sure that you're using products that are safe and that are going to build those hormones that your body needs, because every hormone that your body needs is made. And where does it come from? The food you eat. So hormones are made up of fats and they're made up of proteins, right? All your sex hormones are fat soluble, but there are a lot of hormones that are bound to proteins or made by proteins. In fact, your hormones actually are in a free state or they're inactive, which means that they're basically not used in the body. So when you get a test done on your hormones, just be aware, like if you get a thyroid test done and then do your T3 and T4, ask for a free, that's F-R-E-E, T3, and a free T4, because that will determine what is actually used in the body, not just what's in the body, okay? Because your hormones are bound to proteins, and they can be inactive. So you want to make sure that you understand whether your hormones, even though they may be within range, they may be still causing problems, because you may not be getting those hormones to have an effect in the body, all right? So foods that we eat are basically the substances, the building blocks of all the hormones that our body uses. Now, some can dramatically affect hormone production. Some can sabotage hormone production. Okay, so let's, anyone heard of soybeans? Okay, soybeans, very popular. Years ago they said soybeans causes what? Cancer. What kind of cancer? Breast cancer. There was no evidence for that. It was hypothetical because soybeans have what in them? Estrogen. And so if you have estrogen-type cancers, then the common sense approach was don't have anything that's got estrogen in it. But not all estrogens are created equal, right? So the phytoestrogens from soybeans actually protected the body against the estrogens that cause growth, abnormal growth. Okay, so they actually, instead of causing it, they actually protect you. Same as red clover. Anyone heard of red clover? Red clover has high levels of phytoestrogens. Actually protects you against cancer. There's been a lot of studies done on red clover. It has one of the highest levels of isoflavones. These protect us, these are antioxidants, protect us against getting cancer. They protect against free radical damage. They're very, very beneficial. In the body, they're converted to what we call the brain-derived neurotrophic factors. Okay, basically, it's brain fertilizer. Anyone want some brain fertilizer? Get some red clover, okay? Or have some soybeans. Don't take GMO soybeans, okay? All right. And also processed soybeans. They usually have high amounts of what we call, what are they called now? There's a name for them. Someone said something? They're isolates. Anyone said that? Isolates. So they're very highly concentrated, about 90% protein. I remember I was in Japan one time. I had some students wanted to take me out to a tofu restaurant. Everything was tofu. You had a block of tofu to start with, and then you had tofu soup, and you had tofu ice cream, and everything was tofu. And it was the only time I heard my kidneys screaming at me at the end of that meal. Yeah, too much protein, concentrated protein. So moderation is the watchword there. Okay, but if you've got poor digestion, chances are you're going to have a problem with hormones. Okay, so what did I say was good for digestion? Bitter herbs. Now, for those who recall the Bible history, what did God give to his people when they came out of Egypt, just before they left? What did he tell them to eat? Bitter herbs. They also ate lamb, didn't they? At midnight. High protein diet, isn't it? Generally, you don't eat lambs at midnight. Okay, I don't eat any lambs, by the way. We have some running around in our backyard, but I like them. I think they're quite cute, so I won't eat them. But if you eat a lamb and you're going to run away from some angry Egyptians and cross a desert of 200 miles, you want to have good digestion. So he gave them bitter herbs. So when you have the bitter herbs, it increases the hydrochloric acid. It will break down that protein. And you'll have good ability to run away from angry Pharaoh. Okay. Okay. Yes. So yes, and this is very common for people because, let me tell you, a lot of people have heartburn. And what's the first thing the doctor's going to do if you have a heartburn? He's going to give you antacids. And what do antacids do? They're counteracting hydrochloric acid. Now, here's something you probably don't get taught very much, but when you have heartburn, acid reflux, okay, it's not because you have too much acid. It's the opposite. You have too little acid, okay? When you have too little acid, then what happens is the pyloric sphincter opens up because it doesn't have the pH to keep those calcium ions from contracting around the smooth muscle around that sphincter, and so it opens up, and guess what goes up? Acid. But it's not 1.5 pH. It's like 3.9, 4.2. All right? So you feel the burning, and you think it's too much acid. It's actually the opposite. You didn't have enough acid to begin with to break down that food and keep that sphincter closed. All right? No one I've met has too much acid. No one. It's the opposite. So you don't want to take antacids because that will keep things perpetuating. Okay? You may get temporary relief, but then your body will end up rebounding against that and you'll have a harder and harder time to maintain adequate pH balance. And if you don't get proper acidity in the stomach, then those proteins don't cleave properly and can't make up those building blocks that cause the hormones to be manufactured. All right? And so that leads to dysregulation of the hormonal system. All right? So you need a good diet, because we have a lot of intestinal flora. In fact, there's about, I think there's, someone correct me here, I think there's 10,000 trillion bacteria in the GI tract. It's a lot of bacteria. And these bacteria, there's about 100,000 different kinds of them, and they all have different roles in breaking down different substances. And guess what? Those intestinal flora, those bacteria, they can communicate with your brain. Did you know that? And if you feed them, let's say you feed them a high-processed sugar diet, they get drunk on that diet. And they basically end up getting cravings. And they send these signals through the vagus nerve to the brain to give you a desire to run to the fridge and get more ice cream. Yeah, so what you feed them determines what you end up eating. Okay? It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And what do doctors do? What do doctors do when you have problems with the GI? Let's say you have an infection. Okay, what bacterial infection? What do they give you? Antibiotics. What do antibiotics do? They kill these intestinal flora. And it takes time to build these things back. It usually takes about 6 months. So this is what I used to see. People have antibiotics. Yeah, it would do the job. It would kill the bacteria, but then 2 weeks later, they get a recurring infection. And then they use a stronger antibiotic. And then things clear up, and it goes well for about 4 weeks, and then they end up in the same situation because they're getting weaker and weaker. And guess what? These little guys in the intestines, they communicate, they have their own cell phones, and they communicate with the immune cells. Yes, and if they're not happy, they set up autoimmune reactions throughout the body. This is a primary cause of autoimmune disease. Problem with the microflora and inflammation. Those two go hand in hand, and then you end up with all these autoimmune conditions. And if you want to get rid of any autoimmune condition, you have to get rid of inflammation, and you have to take care of these little guys in the intestinal system. Because let me tell you, they get mad sometimes. Yes, they have their own personality. And boy, if you don't feed them right, they're going to give you a very hard time. And so I read a book one time on bacteria, how they communicate. It's amazing. Do you know that they're so intelligent that they can actually, when they get introduced to, say, an antibiotic, they can come up with new combinations, not only to offset that antibiotic, but future possible combinations that could come and threat them in the future. It's amazing. And they have these little pili, these little communication ducts that connect to other bacteria, and they communicate all the information they've learned to other bacteria, and they make them more resistant. This is why pharmaceutical companies aren't making more antibiotics, different, stronger variants of these antibiotics, is because they're basically making more superbugs, right? That's what they're doing. I had a call just not so long ago from a gentleman. He was calling on behalf of his brother. His brother was in emergency in Florida hospital, and he had tubes in him. They gave him antibiotic after antibiotic. He had this severe infection, wasn't going away. the doctors gave up on him basically, and he said, have you got anything you can send him? So I said, we've got something for the immune system, but I said, don't expect immediate results. It could take a week before you see some effects. He said, would you overnight it to the hospital? I'm thinking to myself, who on earth is going to administer that? I mean, the guy is knocked out, he's unconscious, and he's got tubes in him. What doctor is going to do that? Well, the doctors gave up, and the family was so persistent that the doctors, out of kindness, not out of faith, but out of kindness to the family, they administered it through the tubes into his stomach. And on the 5th day, he came back. On day 5, he came back. And it saved his life, because the thing is, his bacteria were they're getting destroyed. And his immune system was starting to shut down. And he needed something to give him a kickstart that wasn't going to cripple him in the long term. Okay, so if you're eating these types of foods, as you would guess, not good for the hormones. Okay? Yes, in fact, eating hormones is one of the worst things you can do. Do you know there are children in Puerto Rico as young as 6 years of age having children? Yes. And they traced it back to the hormones they were being pumped into the chickens. Yes. Have you seen how chickens can grow? 28 days from an egg to a full-grown chicken. 28 days. How can you do that normally? You can't do that normally. But if you give them artificial hormones, you can do that. And so it's developing, kids at a very, very early age. And so it wasn't that long ago. In fact, about 40 years ago, the average age of puberty for a girl was around 16 years of age. And now it's like you see it 10, right? It's getting very, very weird. And hormones, dairy foods, particularly dairy foods, very high. Also in chickens, very high. Also, they're still using what we call recombinant bovine growth hormones. And they're using that still in cattle, even though it's outlawed in Europe. They're still using this. It's still approved by the FDA. So just be aware of what you're eating. All right, exercise. You want to balance hormones? You need to do some daily exercise. Sleep, so important for hormonal regulation. Do you know melatonin that's produced when you sleep? It is 60 times more powerful than vitamin C as an antioxidant. 60 times. It's one of the most important things. It's about the only substance outside of vitamin A, C, and E that actually can withstand effects on the body, negative effects of radiation on the body. Melatonin, it basically stimulates the immune system, and if you don't get enough of this, you can end up being more susceptible for infections, for depression, for autoimmune diseases, and the list goes on and on. So be careful. Some of these I'm going to have to go through pretty quick. I don't have time to go over all these studies, I'm sorry. Vitamin D is a hormone, right? And so if you're lacking vitamin D, it's going to affect every part of your body. 10% of your genes are regulated by vitamin D, okay? The way you think, I'm getting depressed lately just with all the snow around. We couldn't get out of our driveway for a few days, and just knowing, the sun was just covered in just day after day gloominess, right? I remember one time I was working in Japan. There was a place in Japan called Niigata, and 6 months a year it had no sunlight. 6 months a year. And I was living there, and occasionally, very rarely, the sun would peek through the clouds. And it could be snowing outside. I would take my shirt off, and I would just lie expose my chest to the sun. It was just like seeing an old friend, and it affects us, not just physiologically, but mentally. It affects the way we respond to stress. It affects our digestion. In fact, if your vitamin D levels get into the teens or less, it will drastically affect the way you digest food. And it will drastically affect your ability to overcome an infection. So vitamin D is absolutely essential. And let me tell you this, that there are other things that affect vitamin D being used in our body, such as stress. Stress is a big one. You see, when the sunlight hits the skin, it converts the hydrocholesterol under the skin to cholecalciferol, but then it has to go through the liver and the kidneys to get to what we call the active vitamin D, which is the 125 hydroxycholecalciferol, and that is what is used by the body to regulate hormones and to regulate the immune system. And high stress levels interfere with that process. And also, if you eat a lot of refined carbohydrates, it can interfere with that process. If you have bad digestion, it can interfere with absorption of vitamin D. So we need balance. I was over in Utah recently at this place, and 2,000-ton rock just sitting there perfectly balanced for thousands of years. And it just reminded me of the hormones. Hormones can't be balanced unless you're balanced. And that means having a temperate lifestyle, right? And one of the best ways to regulate hormones, get this, is fasting. Yes, aren't you excited out of your seats? Okay, so fasting, and I'm not talking about prolonged fasting, I'm talking about intermittent fasting. So one of the best ways to do this is skip a meal at night. Most Americans are on 2 meals a day anyway. They just skip breakfast, but you want to eat, eat what you had for supper for breakfast, right? You want to switch it around. And the reason why people don't want to eat breakfast is because their body's still digesting from the night before. And you lose your appetite, and your breath's foul, and you just feel lethargic. It's because your body is still trying to clean up house from the night before. So fasting is an excellent way. You don't have to do long fasting. You don't have to go on a 1-week breatharian diet. You can just eat temperately, and that's what breakfast is, right? Break fast, right? Just skip the meal at night, and it really helps you. It can help you sleep as well. It gives you more energy. You can get back to a more normal weight, and your hormones can be more balanced. Sorry, I'm going to have to skip some of these. Let me just go to some of the botanicals here. All right, we talked about red clover. Red clover is high in these phytoestrogens to protect us. Also, very good for the blood. It's a good blood cleanser. It's good for the liver, and it's also a blood thinner. And it's very helpful for the brain. If you want to increase your brain connections, take red clover. It's also good for men, by the way. We've used this a lot for people that have high PSA levels. If you have problems with the prostate enlargement, take some red clover. It works really well. And don't worry, men, it will not feminize you. I can guarantee it. All right? Yes, you want to get the trifolium pratense. That's the one. It's also very good for hot flashes. It's also excellent if you have infertility. In fact, one of the best texts I love getting is from grandmothers that have just bought, red clover and Vitex usually for their daughter-in-law. And my wife and I, we tried several years to have children, and the doctor said it would basically be a miracle. All kids are miracles, but some are more than others. But anyway, so we tried for several years, and that clock was ticking down, and you get to that 40 mark, and you start to wonder, and felt like Abraham and Sarah waiting for that promised son. Thankfully, there were no Hagars, involved. But we did use some Vitex and red clover. Now, I'm going to get Vitex first, actually. Let me talk to you about Vitex. Vitex is also known as chasteberry. All right, so chasteberry is a hormonal normalizer. It specifically works on the hypothalamus pituitary axis that governs all the ladies' reproductive hormones, follicle-stimulating hormone, gonadotropic hormones. It also works on the balancing the progesterone through the luteinizing hormone. And so this basically is not high in progesterone, but it helps the mechanisms of the hypothalamus and the pituitary to synchronize better so that the progesterone is secreted in a more regular, normal fashion. And this can also help with tender breasts. It can help with also PCOS, endometriosis. It can help with fibroids. We've used this for people who have mood swings. Sometimes it's helpful for people that can't sleep because of mood swings. It can help with hot flashes and amenorrhea, dysmenorrhea. It helps with many different hormonal situations. And so this has been a blessing. Now, if you have hot flashes, this is black cohosh, by the way. Black cohosh can help with that. It on average, though, I just want to tell you that it only works for about 70% of women. All right, and 5% of women could get a headache or migraine from it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Now, I didn't mention, if you're taking Vitex, do not take it with other hormones. Okay, so if you're on any birth control pills or you're any bioidentical hormones, hormonal patches, that type of thing, it's a contraindication. Okay, so just be aware of that. And then we have, this is called cramp bark. Anyone heard of cramp bark? This is an antispasmodic. This is quite effective if you've got really bad PMS cramping. This is very helpful for that. So it doesn't taste good. That's the only thing. Just the smell of it is bad, but it's better than pain. So I recommend that. Cramp bark, very, very powerful antispasmodic. So that's an excellent one. And then ashwagandha. Ashwagandha. Why is ashwagandha good for the hormones? Is because it's so helpful in acting as an adaptogen and regulating the stress response. Okay. We have 3 stages of stress. We have the fight or flight, then we have the adaptive stage of stress, where you get used to the stress. It's a bit like when I flew into California, into Los Angeles, not in the last week, by the way. I didn't try that. And you saw the smog when you went down, but when you're in it, you don't see it. All right? And so that's like being in adaptive stress. You know, you've been in the stress so long, you don't even know you're stressed anymore. Okay? And then you have the 3rd stage, which is exhaustive stage, where your body's just lying flat on a bed, staring at the ceiling. And so that's when your adrenals are really suffering, and the body does that to save your life. Because what it's saying is, you don't have much reserves. I've got to have to put you flat on your back right now, because if you keep going, you'll be dead. So I'm just going to take you out now so that you can get the message loud and clear. Maca root. Maca root improves energy levels, improves moods, enhances sexual health, treats fatigue, depression, helps the cognitive function, sexual dysfunction, increases energy and balances hormones, improves fertility, and helps reduce the symptoms of menopause. This is good for men and women. And you can get the powder. A lot of people put it in their smoothie in the morning. Don't take it at night. It is a stimulant. You want to take stimulants in the morning, not at night, because that's the time you want to be using relaxing things, okay? So I'll get into this more, especially on Sunday. If you come to Sunday, I'll be bringing some herbs, doing a few demos for you guys, and showing you how they work more than what I'm talking about tonight. Milk thistle is another excellent one. Milk thistle has got a chemical called salimarin, and it helps basically protect the liver. It helps with, if you have high liver enzymes, you have a lot of inflammation in the liver. In fact, they use milk thistle IVs to save people's lives from poisonous mushrooms in the hospitals. So the milk thistle is the only thing that can save people's lives with eating poisonous mushrooms. It's very good for fatty liver, and if you've got inflamed liver, I highly recommend it. Saw palmetto is an excellent one for men. All right, if you've got enlarged prostate, if you've got high PSA levels, frequent urination. This often happens because the urethra goes through the prostate and can cause problems with urination. So saw palmetto is an excellent one for men. Highly recommend that. We've had tremendous results with saw palmetto, and there's a lot of clinical studies. By the way, most of these herbs I'm showing you have had several thousand clinical studies done on them. So they've been highly studied. It's just that most people don't even know, they're not even aware of these things. And then we have adaptogens. So adaptogens they're a category of herbs that help resist the effects of stress, okay? And why this is important for hormonal balance is because the higher the stress, the more out of synchrony your hormones are. They stop producing the same amount of sex hormones, and you end up on this roller coaster. So adaptogens help offset that. They basically regulate the cortisol. They help to stabilize blood sugars. They help protect your body against disease. They help with the neuroendocrine system. And they're all used to offset the stress response. So those are excellent herbs. Highly recommend those. I'll go into these a little bit more on Sunday. But I want to have time for some questions. So anyone got some questions? Yes. Can we pass? Hang on. I think we were going to have a stand with a microphone up here for people. Do we?
Questions?
Okay. All right. We just make sure you get the mic before you ask the question because it's going on air. So thank you.
I was just wondering how much vitamin D you would recommend.
Okay. How much vitamin D I recommend? That does depend on how deficient people are. Okay. So if I was in my teens, for example, I would be using at least minimum of 10,000 a day. Minimum of 10,000 a day. I'd also be combining that with sunlight therapy as well. Sometimes people get so low they need 50,000 a day. But as far as maintenance goes, the RDA is only about 800 a day. The trouble is that we don't metabolize that if we just take 800. We're not using it all. So average maintenance dose, if you want to keep it stable, is around about 2,000. Okay, thank you for that question.
You were talking GI health earlier.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on probiotics?
Probiotics, they are helpful. I'm a big believer in what we call prebiotics, which are the building blocks to make a probiotic. Now, if you do buy a probiotic from the store, let me give you a few tips. First, it needs to be refrigerated. Secondly, you want to have multi-strains, ideally at least 50 billion. Okay, and also you want to look for probiotics that have an enteric capsule. That means they're time release, so you don't want them dissolved in the stomach. You want them to be able to bypass gastric acid and get into the small intestines. So for that reason, I recommend one that's got an enteric capsule. But you can also use some herbs that are natural prebiotics that are high in inulin, for example, like dandelion root. Okay, dandelion root is a good prebiotic. So is chicory root. Those are two of my favorites to get high levels of inulin. Yes, next question. Thank you.
What is your recommendation for the best way to ingest like bitter herbs before a meal?
Best way to ingest them. Hold your nose. Well, we actually make a formula called digestive bitters, and what we did to make it more palatable is we put it with glycerin, which is sweet, but it still has enough bitter alkaloids that do the job, but it's not as hard to swallow. So we recommend it that way. Yes, thank you.
What are the bitter herbs?
Oh, there's a lot of bitter herbs. You can use things like horseradish, or there's wormwood, there's black walnut, there's milk thistle, there's dandelion, there's arugula, there's bitter melon, mustard greens. There's quite a. I would just check online, Google, and say all the list of bitter herbs. But there's just a few that we use in our formula. Yes.
Okay. Plant-based diet,
Yes.
is it enough for hormonal health? I have heard
Is it
that
enough?
for the adrenals, you
Yes.
need something like cholesterol to make your hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've kind of struggled with that
Okay.
philosophy.
That's a good question. I appreciate that question. So let me say this, that you don't need any outside cholesterol for your body to get enough cholesterol. The liver makes cholesterol, right? And so it's designed to do that. And cholesterol only comes from something with a face, a mother, or a liver. Okay, did you get that? Anything with a face, a mother, or has a liver has cholesterol. Okay, but you don't need to eat cholesterol to get cholesterol. What the liver makes is what we call white cholesterol. What we commonly eat is gray cholesterol, which is oxidated cholesterol. Okay, which is very dangerous, depending on how old it is, how oxidated it is. So like if you see some cheese, some aged cheese, and it's got a gray look, a tinge to it, that's like playing the Russian roulette with a firearm in your head. You know, it's very high risk. So oxidated cholesterol is bad, but you do not need to eat cholesterol to get enough hormones or to balance your hormones. Your body will regulate that through the liver. Now, I would say this, that you need good digestion, though. Because if you don't get good digestion, then that's going to interfere with the production of cholesterol. So you had another question. So follow up. Yes.
So are all these principles that you're talking about for hormones, do they pertain to women before menopause and afterwards it's off the table?
As far as lifestyle goes, is that what you're asking? Or as far as using herbs?
As far as balancing hormones.
As far as balancing hormones, these principles will apply either side of menopause. Okay, can you give it back the mic? Because I just want to make sure I understood you properly and I've answered you.
Well, when your body
Right.
stops making hormones,
Right.
are these herbs going?
Okay.
They're not going to
Okay.
make you make more hormones when you're like.
Well, let
out
me
of luck,
let me
right?
tell you something. Your body still makes hormones after menopause. So 30% of your sex hormones, when you stop, with the cycle and the eggs and everything, it still is being produced by the adrenals. And the reason for that is because it wants to transition you gradually into a safe place. So here's the thing. Here's the deal. If you've had a lot of stress leading up to menopause, your adrenals won't be able to transfer you gracefully into menopause, and you'll have crashes. So, yes, even though you've passed menopause, you still are producing hormones which affect everything in the body. They're just not produced at the same level. So they still apply, but certain herbs may not be necessary to use beyond a certain point. right? So if you've gone past the you've gone past hot flashes, then there's no point taking black cohosh, right, to help with that. You may take more herbs that are designed to balance hormones through the stress response, such as the adrenals.
I just wanted to ask
Yes.
if you've had a hysterectomy, how does that?
I haven't had one, but I can't speak. That's the limitations there. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, going on her question.
Yes, if you had a hysterectomy,
And I was
You
artificial
still-
hormones,
you-
and then all of a sudden you stop.
Well,
Will
it's-
your body pick back up again naturally?
well, you're going to have a hard time without taking something, right?
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
had a hard
you're going to have a hard time. So,
Like I'm having a hot flash right now.
I'm sympathizing with you up here. So yes, no. When you have a hysterectomy, there's an abrupt change there hormonally. So there are things that can help with that, and those things are going to be more the adaptogens. They're going to help with the hormonal side of things. But it's coming through a different mechanism. Of course, it's not coming through, with the eggs and all the estrogen and progesterone that's been released through that.
The Vitex and red clover, what is the best form to take them?
Okay, that's a good question. Either as a tea or as an extract, and I'll tell you why. Because they go straight in the bloodstream. So the worst way to get a herb in the body is, I'm sorry to say this, is actually the most common way people do it, which is in a capsule or a compressed tablet. And that requires digestion. If you take it at the wrong time, you get little to no effect. And even in the best of times, you're getting about 38 to 52% absorption rates. Whereas if you take the tea or the extracts, you have 98% absorption rates. So they go straight in the bloodstream. They don't require digestion.
On the Vitex, you use the flower?
With the Vitex, it's the berry. It's the berry. Yeah, that's why I call it chaste berry. Or Vitex agnus castus is a botanical name, but it's the berry. Yes. All right, we got time for one more?
One more.
All right, the lady with the camera. I hope I'm not causing anyone to have hot flashes.
I just had a quick question. When you were telling that one story about the antibiotics, what exactly did you give that guy in the hospital?
Oh, okay, yes. So I gave the guy in the hospital, I didn't actually administer it, but we sent what we call super immune booster. It's got some echinacea, golden seal, astragalus root, and Oregon grapefruit.
And you have that out there?
I think so. I think so. I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure we have some. All right. Well, listen, guys. I want to thank you for coming. Please come back tomorrow. We're going to cover cancer. We're going to look at a lot of the causes of cancer, and we're going to look at a lot of the remedies that we can use. And yeah, bring a friend. We still have some seats available, so I hope you can join us again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And God bless you all.
So he's going to be selling tinctures, so if you have like a medical problem or a hormonal issue, you can ask him back there at the table. And then I want to make a quick announcement too. If you're interested in furthering your education in preventive medicine, there's an excellent college called IIOM, International Institute of Original Medicine, and there are so many different degrees you can get there. The information is outstanding, and if you're interested, it's IIOM, International Institute of Original Medicine. And anyways, thank you for coming, and
Yes,
hope to
thank
see
you.
you tomorrow night. Bring a friend.
Yeah. And I'll stay around for a few minutes if anyone else had any more questions. All right. Thank you.